Hey everyone, we are live. We are here again. My name is Allegra Jackson, the Marketing Medulla, and I am here with Coach Ari, and mindset expert and clarity strategist. And we are going to come to you today with another conversation about entrepreneurial cycles, the truth about business. And we already preempted you for this. Last week, we went live in the group for the Women into Networking Win, and we talked about grief and what that looks like. We said that there are 7 cycles, and we're going to talk about that today. We're also going to make sure that you get a chance to comment. Let us know what you feel. We had a lot of great comments last week. People were sharing their grief, their struggles. And we know that in business, you have to be able to maintain your capacity. So if you don't know how to grieve properly, if you don't know how to manage yourself, if you're not disciplined, right? All these things that we talk about, then it's going to be really difficult to do that in the business. And so we want to make sure that from this point, and after we do introductions, we're going to get right to it. But today we want you to understand what grief cycles look like. Maybe you can identify if you are experiencing a cycle of grief and where that is for you, what that looks like for you. And also, we're going to break that down, and we want to hear from you throughout this conversation if this relates to you, resonates with you. And we also want to give you some solution at the end of the day. So make sure that y'all tune in, share this to your friends, and let them know we're here. My name is Allegra. I'm the Marketing Medulla, and I am a business coach, marketing strategist. I also a business analyst, and I love digging into the mess of the business and organizing it, making sure that it looks really clean and neat. Start with the business plan, making sure you know exactly what the foundation of your business is. You cannot know exactly where you're going to go in your business if you don't have that map, which we call a blueprint. So you got to make sure that you have a business plan that's going to tell you exactly where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. Also, making sure you have marketing strategies. We talk about marketing a lot, but this encompasses a lot of things: inbound, outbound, making sure that you understand who your audience is and how you're going to serve them, and if they even want what you have, right? So we got to talk about that as well. But I have programs for you, and we access funding through our resources and partners. So if you're looking for a coach that's going to guide you through all of those parts of your businesses to start, grow, and scale, I'm that coach for you. Very selective, so make sure that you set up a discovery call and see if we're a good fit. If not, I'm going to pass you over to someone like Aarionna, who's going to get you right together. Ari, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm like, I pray I get y'all together. No, I'm just kidding. So, good morning. Happy Monday. My name is Coach Ari. I am the mindset expert and clarity strategist for business owners. My job in this wonderful world and my purpose and calling is to, number one, help you to really remove the mindset blocks that is stopping you from really seeing, the success you want in your life, what God has for you in your business, and hitting those goals. A lot of times we go straight to kind of what Allegra said, like the marketing and the social media, and that we go straight to those things, not understanding like it doesn't matter how much strategy you get if you mentally cannot overcome your own doubts, fears, insecurities, and all of these things. You're not going to take any action. So that mindset part for business owners is really, 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 really big. And I'm so excited because I feel like now the industry is really waking up to like, yeah, mindset is a big piece, not just in being motivated, not just in being inspired, but like, how do I really reprogram my mindset? So that's where I come in as that mindset expert. I really teach you how to reprogram the mind so that it works for you and not against you, how to control things like emotions and unwanted trauma, whether it be from childhood, relationships, so on and so forth. And then after we get control of the mind, after we kind of reprogram our thoughts, now we can move with clarity. You cannot build a successful brand, I don't care what it's in, if you don't have clarity of the mind so that you can be able to strategize to get to where you want to get to. So once we get that mindset together, we come in and we get some clarity in a couple things: your mission and your message. I believe in what I've called and coined impact marketing, which is I am building my business to impact lives. And if I focus on the impact and I'm very clear on how I want to impact them, the results I want them to get, my messaging and what I say to impact their lives, sales follow. It's actually a pretty simple process. So we get that clarity together, we strategize from there so that way you can impact, the lives you're called to impact with your business and also increase your sales. So I'm excited for the conversation today. Because if y'all missed our live well, did we do it last Friday, last Thursday? Whichever, in our Women into Networking community plug, if you're not a part of it, you got to get a part of it. You missed a good live, but we're going to get into it today because it was so many pieces that we just didn't get to hit. So let's get into it.
Yeah, it was really good. And you can watch that replay anytime, but we're just going to talk today about just elaborate on it. I want to start off just by saying that if you have a business and you it's the holiday season, right? Everyone's looking at like, what kind of holiday sales am I going to do? And Black Friday's around the corner, and Christmas, what am I going to do? Like, what kind of stocking stuffers? There's so many things that you can do in your business, like so many avenues you can take. That's why it's not easy, right? And I want people to understand something I said in a room not that long ago. I said, especially for 9-to-5ers, and this is a big thing because when we go into the holiday season, this is where it gets tough because you're working 2 jobs. Let's not get it twisted. Like, you're working a 9-to-5 and another 9-to-5. It just so happens to be your business. So you can't just say, oh, I just gotta stop. I can't work the business right now. Like, that's your other 9-to-5 job. That's your other bread and butter. So when we get to this place in our business cycle, we have to realize that that's going to put a lot of stress on us. That's going to put a lot of like pressure. And also, one of the things which we'll cover, the grief stages, it mentions in one of the grief stages that if you're going through something and you're not properly processing it, that it will keep coming up when all these major things happen in your life. Whether it's, hey, I need more money and I need a job, or there's a birthday coming up and I don't have the money, or holiday coming up and now I got to do all these things, right? If you don't go through your grief stages, baby, it's going to come back up. So I wanted to, number one, identify what grief is. And, I was looking up an article because I don't want to give y'all anything that I don't know. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist, right? I didn't go to school for that. But I do have eyes and ears and I can use Google. So there are so many different types of grief, y'all. Like, there's so many different types. And they talked about it in these different articles that I was reading. But there's grief that happens when, like I was talking about, you have emotional loss. So there's like things that you lose in your life that are emotionally lost, but the person can still be there. You can still be in the place, but you no longer have that same relationship or that same interaction. I think that that's overlooked a lot, because I think a lot of times when we lose a physical person, that is a clear sign that you have to grieve, right? Because that person is no longer there. You cannot get them back. So you're going to like feel it no matter, you just can't do anything about that. But I think sometimes when we have an emotional loss, it gets overlooked how that impacts us and how heavy that is on us, because it is not a physical thing. And grief is like the experience of coping with loss. Like, that's grief. You're coping with loss. I got a little Wi-Fi signal up there. I don't know what that is. I hope it's not saying that my Wi-Fi.
It's like you're freezing a little bit, but we can hear you clearly.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah,
Maybe that's my Wi-Fi.
clearly, but
okay, well, let's let it get itself together. But I'll continue since you can hear me clearly. So it talks about grief experience of that is coping with loss, and is usually associated, like we said, with a death, right? So you have a death of a loved one, death of someone close to you, and the thing about grief is that any change that challenges your identity or your life routines can cause you grief. And like, just like when I looked at that, I was like, that's a lot of different things, y'all. Like, that's like, and it's different for everyone. So, when we tell people, hey, you shouldn't feel that way, that shouldn't make you feel sad. Like, how can they tell you? Like, there's no way for them to say that, because it's your identity, it's your life routine. So,
all right. I think we might have lost you there. Allegra, let me make sure it's not me. All right, so I think we may have lost her. I will jump in for the time being. So, for me, I think that it's interesting. I think one of the biggest components or pieces about what Allegra was discussing in loss, in that it can be a loss, you're grieving a loss of a person who is still there or still alive. Like it doesn't have to necessarily associate itself with that person being dead and gone. I think going through losses where people are still very much alive are some of the hardest ones. So I lost my father when I was 7 years old. And it was very hard because I had a very vivid memory of my dad. Like even as I got older and I remembered things and experiences with my dad, I was like, there's no way I could have been seven, because the things that I remember, it feels so fresh in my mind. But it was easier, and because I've been through both stages of loss and grief, whether it was with somebody who actually passed away, like my father, my grandmother on my dad's side, or loss of physical people that are still alive and well, but the friendships, the relationships, the business partnerships were a loss. It was easier to accept and grieve the process of my father because he was not there physically. So for me, it was something that I kind of I had to grieve, I had to accept, versus when you grieve a relationship of, hey girl, I was just talking about a couple of grieving the differences in what you said and how I feel like grieving somebody or a relationship that's still alive versus one where you physically lost somebody. I feel like grieving that loss that's still alive is the harder one. And I can say that because I've been through it. And I was just saying I lost my dad at 7. I had to accept that. I had to accept it. He wasn't coming back. He wasn't going to knock on my door one day. So I had to grieve. I had to process. And I say I had to because there's some people who haven't processed physical death. But for me, it was a thing of I had to process it. But grieving people that are still alive, but just the relationship and the time and that being gone is harder because they're still physically present. And so sometimes what happens when you have to grieve physical relationships that are not dead and gone and they're still here, is that you try to process why. And you can get caught in a years, let me be very clear, not a year. You can get caught in years of trying to process why didn't it work. And so it's almost like it's just a constant open wound, because if I see them on social media or if I see a photo, or your phone is really great at bringing up memories of like 2009 and blah 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 blah, and let's just say the friendship or relationship fell apart in 2019. So here comes it's to show you a 9 year ago doggone memory, and here you go all over again. Well, why didn't it work? And don't, oh Jesus, okay. And when you don't process grief, because now I'm like, wow, excuse me. When you don't process grief properly, you will try to go back and repair something that was a loss, and it was a loss for a reason. But human mentality says, well, we're different people now and we've grown. So maybe I can go back and reopen the wound and like figure out how to fix it and maybe it'll work. So I think grieving, in my opinion, having been through it, grieving a death was easier than grieving a lost relationship, knowing that person is still alive, well, breathing, living their life, because I had to process the why of it. And thank God I don't get caught up in the why, but it did not make it easier.
I think I agree with you. I think it's who you are and how you process things and how you see life, right? Because I may say, oh, a physical death is easier because this person is still here, and I may say that for about one person, but then for someone else it may be different. And I think what you hit on really, first of all, when we just said the causes of grief, and sorry y'all, my internet is acting wonky, so it kicked me out. But it's talking about the causes of grief, and that it's any change that challenges your identity or life routine. So, like, if your identity is changed and your life routine is changed, then how can you go back to something that no longer like fits that? It like it's uncomfortable. And I think grief comes from that place unknowingly. Sometimes we're grieving and we don't even realize it. Like, you're grieving and you're going through these processes, and we're going to talk about the 7 steps. There's like 5 to 7, but I like the 7 because it like really lays it out. But I mean, we're going through this grieving stage and we don't even know we're grieving. We're just like, I'm fine. Let me just go do the business. Like, we're hurt. Like, hurt. And I think that grieving, it looks different for people, right? Like, if I'm looking at someone from the outside looking in, and I'm looking at you and you're grieving, you're not going to see what I see. You're going to be going through the grief cycle unknowingly. As I think Tamisha said it last week, she said her dad died and she went straight back to work, right? And for, her, it can be like, okay, well, I'm back to work. I'm busy. I'm a busybody. Like, I don't have to worry about what I'm feeling, right? Because that's really what we're avoiding. We're avoiding getting into the pain of what that grief feels like, because it's pain, right? Like, if you're grieving, you're going to feel different stages that we're going to talk about, and it's painful. And so people don't want the pain. So they're like, I'll just go back to work, right? But you never actually get to the last stage of grief, which is the where we really all want to be, right? You never get there because we're so focused on, well, what can I do to avoid the pain? So we got to realize what that looks like for us. And if we are actually grieving, because if we're not acknowledging it, then how can we get through the stages? How can we even? But other people are already seeing it in you. Like, don't get it twisted. No one's like, you can't hide it from anyone. When you're grieving, it shows on your face, it shows in your body movements, it shows in your work ethic. Like, I remember when I was grieving in the pandemic, I know because I know. When I was grieving in the pandemic, y'all, I was showing up for my business every day. I was waking up on time every day. I was praying too, right? But here's the thing: you could pray your entire day away, but if you're not physically acknowledging what's happening inside of you, then you just wishing a prayer. Like, you're not you're not actually like helping yourself get healed through the process of grief, because you're not acknowledging what your body is feeling. Like, your body is getting sick every day because you're in this first stage of grief. But here's what you can grieve from, because people can see it. People can see it on your face, they can see it in your actions, they can see it in your words, they can hear it. You can grieve from the death of your friend, family member, partner, or pet. You can grieve from the end of your marriage or your friendship. You can grieve from leaving your home, your neighborhood, your community. You can grieve from the end of your job or your career. For me, it was the business, right? You can grieve from losing financial stability. Like, you were once in a good financial place and you lost it all. You can grieve from that. You can grieve from the death of a dream or a goal. A lot of us are over here grieving from that alone and have not even acknowledged it, right? Like, you thought that's what it was going to be, and it's like it didn't pan out, and you're never going to get that. So you're like, oh, it hurts, but you're not accepting the grief process. Loss of your health. Some people have lost certain levels of health for themselves, especially since the pandemic, and they're not grieving that. Right? The end of your youth, honey, grieve. You not young no more, grieve. And then the last 2, being unable to have children. There are too many women that are unable to have children. I hear it on social media a lot, right? This is what we talk about in health, but we're not really saying what we're really supposed to be saying, which is the pain point is that you can't have kids. But what the problem that people are talking about is, oh, do you have fibrosis? Do you have fibromyalgia? Do you have this? Like, they're talking about all these different pain points, but the real pain is that you're grieving a loss that you feel like you can no longer have children. Okay. And then the last one, loss of the life you had before, like a disability or an illness. So I'll stop there before I even go into stage 1 of grief. And I'm sure some of y'all probably Googled it, but we're going to just talk about it. And I want to hear from you. If you have any type of feedback on this, if you've experienced this, or if this is something that you know someone that's going through it. But Aarionna, what do you have to say?
I have to say that wow, I've experienced so many different stages, things of to grieve from. That's what I have to say. I'm sitting here like, yeah, that's facts. I've dealt with that. I've dealt with that. I've dealt with that. I'm sitting here taking off how many things I've, suffered grief from. And it's funny, I was praying about one last night. I was literally praying about one last night, like, because it was a grief in business when I had to go back and get a 9 to 5. And I was so angry. When I say angry, I was, well, it's my best bestie, so she know. But I was angry. Like, I felt like it just didn't register with me. And I've been angry for a long time. I was very angry about it. And for me, I was, just praying and talking to God last night. And I was like, that's what happened. That killed my momentum. It snatched a piece of oh, it's gonna happen. I know God can do it. It's nothing. Like, anybody who knows me knows, like, my faith is like, baby, don't touch, don't shake. So when I had to get a 9 to 5 again, it really did something to me. And I really prayed about it last night. Like, that's where it chipped my armor, because I was angry. And I wasn't angry at God. I wasn't angry at God. I was just angry that, I don't know, maybe like my belief didn't work. So it felt like it snatched something from me, right? So I was grieving that I was so like on and just like, oh yes, like da da da. And then it felt like something got snatched from me. And I just was like, I just prayed about it. I really prayed about it. I prayed about, like, I'm not doing this. Like, no, it can't, it was kind of like a reset. But I think a part of grieving is accepting, like you said, and coming into your honesty. Like, you have to come into that honest truth that I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm betrayed, I'm broken, my expectations were shattered. You have to come into, like, the truth of that, so you can start that grieving process and really deal with how it affected you. And I think we're afraid to deal with, how did it affect me? We're afraid to say, some people are afraid to say, I'm angry. Like, that's just the truth. I was mad. I was pissed because I was like, no, like, this just doesn't happen in my world. Like, what are you talking about? All things work together for my good. Like, this is absolutely not. Like, we gonna get it. But I had to accept, like, no, I've been angry. I was angry for a long time because it didn't make sense to me, so that I could be able to process how it affected me. Because the problem is this: if you don't come to the truth of it, of how it made you feel and what you actually have experienced, then you can't deal with the effects. So then you live your life with a handicap, and you keep trying to advance and you keep trying to move, but because you haven't dealt with this thing that has affected you, how it affected you, you won't even acknowledge that it affected you, then you're just you that's why you feel like you take 2 steps forward and 10 steps back, because you won't deal with this effect, because you haven't just said, I'm broken, I'm angry, I feel let down, I feel dropped, I feel like my expectations were crushed. And how do I recover from that? But like you said, we do things like we work over it, we build over it. And my favorite saying is, you can't build a business over trauma. You cannot build a business over trauma.
I'm
Dude.
cracking up. I feel you. I feel you. I can't think that we all are going to know all these things. That's why we have these conversations, right? And you may be grieving, which a lot of us are. We're just not acknowledging it, right? And so that's why having the conversation is really important, Now, I listed a whole bunch of reasons we grieve, a whole lot of reasons we grieve. Okay. And somewhere down the line, we may be experiencing, for me, my emotional loss recently. And here's what's so great about understanding this, y'all, is that when you realize that there is a process to a lot of these things we go through, but we're actually holding on to it without going through the process, we're the problem. That's really what it comes down to, because we always have to go through some level of processing, right? Just life goes on. And so, you may be grieving from a lot of different things. For me, it was the end of, a relationship that I thought was what it was. Okay. Now, there's, y'all, what I really also, I want to go to the first stage of grief, which is something that Aarionna, you touched on already. And the first stage of grief is denial. Okay. And here's what's so it's funny, because when I first looked up the stage of grief, I'm like, because I was going through therapy. So, and a hint to my story, I've suffered physical and emotional loss in the pandemic. So I had to actually stop, because I got a therapist while that was happening. And I was like, wait, something's not right. I need help. That's like the best words I think anyone can ever say. I need help. And when I got to that point of like, okay, well, I want to, see what more there is to this grieving process, and I started doing my own research, I was blown away of how much we don't allow ourselves to grieve. And it started I started thinking about all the things in my life that I never grieved from. All the things, y'all. It was like crazy. So that first stage of denial, once I realized what it was, which I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, because Aarionna, you said it. You said, well, you had to go to the back to a 9 to 5, which most people are doing right now. Like, it's not. This is when we start to realize that this isn't just happening to us; it's happening to everyone. You're not special because you went through, the business not really blowing up like you thought it would, and you had to go back to 9 to 5. So what? It happens to everybody. But if we become victimized, right? That's the denial. That's us acting like, oh, well, woe is me. It happened to me. So what? It happens to everyone. So, right? Or we actually get to a point of saying, like, okay, so when you first learn of the loss, it's common to think this isn't happening. That's denial. Shock. You're in shock. You're numb to it, right? And it's a temporary way to deal with the rush of overwhelming emotions. It's a defense mechanism, right? So when I talked about, and I'll do the recent one, Aarionna, I want to hear from you. The recent situation where I was experiencing emotional loss from a family member that I've known my whole entire life, which I would be like, I never thought that I would experience any level of dysfunction, loss, lack of. It was just like, oh no, like this is who we are. And we talked about, once you change in your life, sometimes things have to change with you. And so that causes a disruption in your relationship, especially when you start to open up your eyes to things. And that's kind of what happened to me. But for a very long time, y'all, I was given the awakening of it. Like, I basically knew that things weren't right. I felt it. There were little key signs of it, right? Like, we call them red flags. But for a long time, I was just in denial. Even when it came to the point where I had separated from this person for like an entire year. And I think, Aarionna, because you know the situation very well, I think you even told me, you were just like, I don't know if you really like are kind of like all the way healed through the process yet, because I know you said that you healed and you're separated, but I don't know. Like, so, and I told y'all, people can see it, right? And so I think, denial is where I want to start, because this isn't happening doesn't mean that you're in full clarity of that, right? Sometimes we're just acting like it is what it is, and it really isn't. And that can look like a lot of different things, okay? For me, it was like, oh yeah, it's fine. Like, this is all I got to do, A, B, and C, and we'll be just fine. Like, but what was happening really was that it was never going to be the same. It was never going to go back to the way it was. It was never, ever, ever going to go back to the feeling, the whatever I came from, where it came down to that. Sometimes you get that comfortable feeling in relationships with people where you're just like, oh, this is love. Listen, honey, feelings are not love. Okay, feelings are feelings. And that comfort zone will keep you real stuck. So that's the denial for me. That was the fact that I thought that there was a way to actually get that back. And the truth of the matter, and this is when the grieving started, was when I realized I would never be able to have that type of relationship with that person again. So that denial stage, that's where I was. And we're going to talk about the next one. But Ari, what do you think of, about that
Well, here's a couple things, right? Number one, avoidance is not grieving. And so sometimes we disconnect. And I've been through, I told you when you was going through yours, I went through one too. And if we disconnect and we're not dealing, we're just avoiding. So you're not grieving, you're not dealing with it, you're not processing, you're not going through the emotions. So sometimes what we do is we tell ourselves, I'm gonna remove myself from the situation. Like, done, this is unhealthy for me, this is not good for me. And you're right but wrong. Because if you don't properly manage your emotions, your mindset, your time, your if you don't grieve in the process of disconnecting, then you just avoided it. That's all you did. You didn't work through the triggers, you didn't work through the trauma. So then when that relationship comes back to your front door, because if it's like a family relationship and it's someone that you've known all your life and things like that, that relationship is going to come back around. Whether it be in a healthy way or not, whichever, it's going to come back around. So if I just disconnected to avoid and not disconnected to process, then when you come back, it's all of it all over again because I did nothing. And of course, you probably did nothing because you didn't see anything wrong with it. I'm the one that disconnected. So it's foolish for me to then come back and think you did something. And that was the thing, is like, we make the decision to disconnect and then we get mad if the other person doesn't change. They never had a desire to change. They didn't disconnect from you. They didn't say I need time apart. They were living their regular old life perfectly fine. And you made the decision, we make the decision and say, I need to disconnect because this is not healthy for me. So then the onus is on me to change. The onus is on me to do the work. And I think we sometimes unconsciously put unrealistic expectations on people. So the disconnect was for you to change, wasn't for that person to change because they had no problem. They never saw a problem. That's why you disconnected because they never saw a problem. Here's the second point. Our minds tell us, oh my God, it'll never be the same. It's the same thing people did in pandemic. They kept trying to go back to how it was. How it was got us in this freaking situation. So why do I want to go back to how it was? Our minds, this is why I'm so big on like reprogramming our minds to think correctly, because sometimes we've learned such unhealthy thought processes that I just think I don't know, nobody knew, or we haven't come into revelation of it. God is amazing like that. He picks the season, the time. If everything that I knew got me to here where I want to disconnect from you, if everything we were doing before the pandemic got us to the place where the doggone airports were shut down, we was running out of funds, we did all this chaoticness, why in the freaking world do I want to go back to something that's going to cause me to repeat the same life? But our brains, our emotions tell us, oh, it was so much better before. Forgetting that everything that happened before this breakdown is what got us here. That's the second point. We shouldn't desire for it to be back the same. And that's not easy. Because as I'm telling you this, there's something that I'd be wishing go back to the same. And I'm like, dang, light bulb, thanks God. Oh, I don't want the same. because the same has the potential to bring you right back here to then repeat. And this is what we do. We do this. Let's just try to make it like it was, and wonder why we get hurt again. Here we go in in the entrepreneurial cycle. You're back in the same position. Now you got this because nothing changed. But we all desire change. It's so crazy, right? It's just like a double, like, what? Entendre, like, but we want change. So the desire that our emotion tells us you should yearn for how it was, we have to fight that because how it was got me in this grieving process. So no, I don't want it. I don't want
You know, you said so many great things. I just want to highlight, because this conversation can probably go on for a long time, because I know we used to do series and we used to like take these conversations to like the end of the whole month, and we just had an ongoing like really good conversation. It gets deep. And when I mentioned earlier that Aarionna had to really like bring some things out, and it just doesn't matter what the situation is, whether you decide to leave or they leave, whatever the case may be, it's just a process of knowing what needs to be done in order to be healthy when you come back to the table. And I think you just laid it out, because when listen, if you're not doing the work, like if you don't realize that grieving is a process that you're going to go through, and when I said the first stage is denial, people are stuck there, like really really stuck there. I was, and it has a lot of different faces, because for me, denial, like we said, and this is how you know you're in denial. When you think about the situation, it's like you feel like you're numb or in shock, right? And that was one of the things that I remember feeling, like a little paralyzed. I don't know if I can really paint the picture for y'all, but that's just what it was for me. Kind of like, that moment where I would think about it and I'll be like I would know that I'm thinking about the situation, right? And the fact that that person said that to me, and this is how it would come out. It wasn't like I just analyzed the whole situation and was like, oh, this is not good. No, there were little things that happened throughout time in that relationship that would just come back to me while I was grieving, because you can't help but to grieve when your subconscious knows that that person is no longer the person that you knew. Whether you want to believe it or not, at the forefront, your brain and your body kind of knows it already. That's why we start getting sick, because your body is like, dummy, like you clearly are getting sick from this situation, but we keep putting ourselves around people that are making us sick, right? So what happened to me, to Aarianna's point, is I would actually still be talking to this person, right? In denial. Like, okay, well, I'll just kind of like just have this conversation, right? And then and it'll be little things, like it'll be like, no, I'm not going to talk to them like I used to, but let me go ahead and send them this birthday money real quick, or let me go ahead and do this. And then like the stuff that would happen that would come back from those actions would be like shocking. Like they actually did that, but my brain, y'all, could not, like, it wasn't like getting it, right? So what happens is you start to just accept those little things as like, okay, well, I'm just not going to think about it, right? That denial just seeps in deeper and deeper and deeper until you actually, fully deny the fact that it is even happening at all. So that's the first step, okay? But listen, here's what was crazy. Once you actually get to the point of realizing that it is real, okay? Because you'll get to the point where you're like, nah, this is really happening. This person is really doing this. No, that person is really dead. No, that person, that situation, that goal, that dream is actually gone. I'm not going to get that. And that could be for anything, right? A lot of us have different things that we have on our plate in life, and we have to understand what's important for us. But once you get past denial of that thing not happening anymore, guess what else sets in? This is what got me. I was like, it should be easier, right? Because I was in denial. That's kind of messed up. Like, you denying stuff is real. It's weird, a little crazy. The next one was anger. Anger was the next step. And I was like, oh, okay, this is messed up because not only do I get to be in denial, which means that I'm over here looking dumb, right? I'm looking dumb for to myself. Then I got to turn around and now I'm like, I got an attitude problem. And anger sets in because of this is a reason, right? It says as reality sets in, as reality. This is not the dream that we created of denial. As reality actually sets in, you're faced with the pain of your loss. You're faced with the pain of it. The feelings that you have, you may feel frustrated and helpless. It later turns into anger. So you're basically out here like mad at the world because this is what people do. Like, and you gotta be careful because this is how we fail in business too. Because a lot of times when we don't deal with the grief part all the way and we don't know which stage we're in, we'll get past denial and you'll have that aha moment and you'll be like, oh, this mofo. And then you'll start getting mad and then you'll get mad at everybody. Right? You won't just be mad at the person. You won't just be mad at the situation. You'll be mad at you. You'll be mad at the person. You'll be mad at your kids. You mad at your husband, your wife. You mad at your coworkers, your boss, your clients, right? Your partners, your vendors. Anytime somebody do something wrong, you're going to be mad. Because when you experience anger, and this is why we got to be very, very real about the fact that we're going to go through it. Because when you do experience it, you got to be able to compartmentalize it. Like, where does that anger go? Like, it should not be released to the world. Your anger should be able to have a place that you're processing it in. And that's why, for me, I went and hired somebody, right? Like, I like to get support because when I get angry, it's a little different because I'm a nice person, okay? But for most people, they're able to process their anger and they know how to do it. But do you know how to process your anger? And do you even know that you're in that stage? But Aarionna, go ahead. I want to hear from you.
Well, listen, I'm just like, that's exactly what I had to process through. Last night when I was praying, was that I was angry. Um, and you do have to be careful because when you get in that space of anger, like that, see, anger is an emotion that has now become very unstable, uncontrollable. The Bible says be sober minded, and everybody takes that to like alcohol and drugs. I'm not saying that's not a part of it, but anything that takes you out of a sober mentality where you can think straight so that you can make educated, wise, knowledgeable, smart decisions makes you unsober. Okay. Anger is one of the things we don't talk about that is just as bad as getting sloppy drunk and being uncontrolled and out of control of your emotions, your body, and all that. People literally become drunk in anger. That's why they go shoot people or blah 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 blah. Like, you can get literally drunk in anger and now you are not sober minded. The reason why it's so important to really ask yourself, do I need the assistance or can I deal with this or what? Because you can then become drunk in anger and make very bad decisions. And here's the problem. This is why the Bible says emotions are not your friend. Because once they calm down, you have to deal with all the aftermath that your anger took you through. It's just like when you get drunk and you done did something stupid. When you get back sober, you got to deal with whatever you didn't remember that you did. And God help us, because what was it that you did? Like, and hopefully you're around the right people, blah, 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 da, 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 da. You went behind the wheel, a lot of stuff. Well, anger is the same way. And so it's dangerous because you can make very irrational decisions and then have to deal with the aftermath once your emotion changes. Because emotion changes. Literally, we can be talking right now in the next 5 seconds crying or laughing. Like, it's just that quick. So that anger part is real because now you kind of like going through the, oh, and then this and then blah 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 blah. When I was angry about, having to go back to get another 9 to 5, I was mad at everybody. I was mad at all the people who was like, well, yeah, maybe you should. I was mad at baby. I was mad. Okay, like, why would y'all even say that to me? Why did you build me up? Why didn't you tell me stand on your feet, girl? Keep walking.
Wait. Can
Like,
we really like bring it to the forefront, please? Because
yeah.
I had to get the lashing, y'all. Like, I had to be one of them people where I just be like, well, dang, I just asked how your day was at work. Like, dang, like, what you mad
I can't
about? Like,
laugh.
you got a
I
job.
can't laugh. I legit can't even laugh because I'm getting over this stupid cold. Whatever. I was angry. I was mad at everybody, baby. I was like, and ready to just let anybody have it because I was so. And then you have to ask yourself, and I think this is the part that we all have to come to it. Who you really angry at? The truth is, we really be mad at ourselves, whether it's because of a person, whatever. I'm really mad that I let myself down, or I allowed this person to even do this. I'm mad that I didn't have my boundaries set. I'm mad that I wasn't on my stuff like I should have. I'm mad. I am mad that I brought myself here. So when you get to that stage of anger, you come out of denial, you get into the anger. I'm interested to know what's the next one. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I'm interested to know what the next one is because you have to come into some self awareness, some self acceptance. Like, this is
Oh,
really on
well,
me.
well, let's go. Let's move on because if you're talking about the first stage being denial,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next stage being anger, which we just clearly stated, you could be angry towards everybody, even yourself, which I think is like crappy because your clients and your customers don't deserve it, y'all. But the next stage is bargaining.
Mm.
Bargaining. So listen, this is where you dwell on what you could have done to prevent the loss. This is where you start thinking about like, oh, if only this or what if that. Like you like listen, this is another part. This is another part of it. You try to strike a deal with a higher power. But I mean, this looks
Okay.
different for everybody. It looks different for everybody. And so, for bargaining stage, this is really like a very this look, y'all. When I went through this stage, I was pitiful. I was really pitiful. I mean, and this is why going through grief is not pretty. This is why it's a serious thing and that people get support for this, right? Because when you're going through it, you don't feel good about yourself. You're not always feeling good about yourself. I had to eliminate when I went through these stages of grief, y'all. I had to eliminate people around me that would add to the grief. Like I did. I had to eliminate because I already knew, like, I'm going through something. And then I got these people over there asking me for stuff. I don't need you to ask me for nothing else. Like, don't ask me for nothing. Don't tell me you're going through something. I'm going through my own stuff. Don't tell me you had a bad day. I don't care. Like when you're going through your own grief process, you need people around you. So it is your responsibility to put yourself in that space. No one's going to do it for you. So I had to realize that. And so, when I went to the bargaining stage, y'all listen, that was a very embarrassing stage for me because I felt embarrassed by the fact that I was actually making excuses, right? For things that happened. Like it was like I was just thinking, well, what if I would have did this differently? And then I would feel bad that I would say that because I would be like, well, how dare I mean, I shouldn't have had to do nothing. Listen, I was going back and forth. I was like, well, I shouldn't have to do nothing different. Listen, they should have did this, they should have did that, especially when it came down to my ex and my 7-year relationship. You know how y'all come on now. Like it you know how we do. Like we get to this point as women where we be like, oh, I'm a queen. So anyway, I shouldn't have had to pick up anything. I shouldn't have to, but then I had to like get back to the stage of like, okay, well, but what if I did that? Maybe it would have been different. What if I would have, like not what if I would have compromised? And this is the sad part. I would literally say stuff to myself that would be like, Like, what if you would have compromised your beliefs? Like that's not pretty. It's not pretty when you start to what if things that are not healthy, and you start to bargain with yourself and your own confidence and your own self-worth. That's just not pretty. And so what it does, and I'll end with this part. What that grief stage does, what that part of it does, is it actually tests how much you really love yourself. It really does. It tests, because I went through it. And I was like, that's the stage where I had to really question, do you love yourself if you are really thinking these things about bargaining with the past? Like, okay, what if you would have just lowered your standards? What the heck? So I had to really come to terms with that. Like, why am I even thinking that way? And it was because somewhere deep down inside, I was willing to compromise my beliefs. And somewhere down the line, that's exactly what I did. Whether I was, realizing it or not, in denial or not, that's exactly what happened. And most of the time, when we get to a point where our relationships are not the way we want it to be, a lot of times it's because we made the choice of allowing that relationship to get to that point. So and that's not necessarily always, you know every relationship and every loss, but I mean, for me in my situation, y'all, like what I was just telling y'all about, that part was where I had to find out, oh, you may not love yourself as much as you think you do, boo.
Okay, so I have an appointment that I have to keep. So we have to do a part two because I know that's not all the stages.
We
So we
got
have to
some
come back next week and do a part two because I have to go. But that stage has so much encompassed in it that I'm gonna try to like hit it in like quick. There's a toxic side, there's a healthy side to me of bargaining, right? So I thought about my experience, my recent experience with the grief. And I'm like, at first I was like, oh, well, no, I didn't bargain in a bad way. But then I thought about it, like, yes, I did. I was bargaining with God in a real, like, harsh way to myself. Like, what did I do wrong? I'm not good enough. I disobeyed God. I did it. And I was beating myself. It's where, the Bible says there's no condemnation. God doesn't condemn you, the devil does. And these thoughts come in your mind like, you could have done better. You should have did it. You did it. And so you go into this self abuse. And there's no grace there. There's no love there. It's okay. It's gonna be all right. That doesn't mean the whole world's falling apart. There's no grace there. And it's actually wild that you can do that with God. Like I'm going to God in prayer, condemning myself, like beating myself for what I should have did right. I should have done this. I should have did this better. And I've talked to you about it, how God told me, like, I'm gonna show you real love. Like, because that's not love. Yes, you should evaluate, how did I get here? That's wisdom. How did I get here? Was it something I could have done better? Or was this, I did everything I was supposed to do, and these are just the cards that I'm being dealt, and I just have to stay through it. I just got to keep it straight. I got to stay focused, stay doing what I was doing because I'm doing good. Um, but I think because we don't know how to healthily sit back and assess, there's only condemnation or, girl, I didn't do nothing wrong. Girl, by clearly the devil just getting on me. Like, there's no healthy way to sit down and say, like, no, I was wrong, not wrong to where I'm a horrible person and I'm just da 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 da. But I just could have done this better. And that's why a lot of people fail in business, because when things don't go right in business, because we don't have a healthy way to assess the situation and not abuse ourselves, but be honest with ourselves and say, you could have been more consistent, bro. Like, you could have emailed that stuff on time or mailed out that package when you're supposed to. Like, that is a you thing that you can control, that you could have done better. We just, we don't have that balance. And so I'm thinking about my, like, how you're assessing yours, and I'm like, yeah, I did go through that stage where I was like, um God, like, this is my punishment, like just ignorance. And then I got to a stage of like, well, I made a mistake. I might have made some mistakes. I could have done some things better, but it doesn't disqualify me from living a blessed life. It doesn't disqualify my business from being blessed. It doesn't disqualify me from like, I'm not a bad person. I'm trying my best, and at your best, you're going to drop the ball. But I don't have to mutilate and I don't have to abuse myself. And so I think, like I said, I think this stage of grief, there's a very toxic, unhealthy, and then there's a healthy way to deal with it, to say, how do I keep myself from getting here again? I don't want to be here again. So let me, with love and grace, assess how I can be better versus, like I said, either woe is me, I'm just horrible, blah, blah, or ain't nothing wrong with me. And I think that ain't nothing wrong with me is actually wild. It's crazy. Like, arrogant at its highest form. Like, bro, chill out. But also, don't beat yourself down. And that's exactly what I did. Like, and as a believer in business, like, I literally was in God's face, like, I'm horrible. Like, I failed you, and clearly, like, if I had to go back to 9 to 5, I'm the worst. Like, what did I do? And it's a real phase. I think it's interesting. I didn't process my grief this way. This is cool. I'm with it.
Yeah, this is, and this is something that we do just in general. Like, if you're a coach and you don't understand, your clients and where they are in their life, this is a great thing to add to your plate. Like, I actually use these type of things in my programs because I know that you're going to have a business, but you're also going to go through things. Like, and so if we don't acknowledge some of these things that are happening, right? And as leaders, it doesn't matter what kind of business you have. As a leader in your business, you have employees, right? My staff, my team, I have to know exactly what's going on. Like, if you come to work and you're not showing up doing the work right or whatever, I can't just be like, oh, you're fired. Like, what if you're going through something? So it's really important to understand grief symptoms too. And I know Aarionna has to dip out. We're way over the hour. But I'll finish up, Ari, if you got to dip out, because I want to just really span on a couple of things. But we're going to review this next week, where we're going to go over the last two grief stages: depression. Well, actually, this is not necessarily 7, I don't think, today, but we'll elaborate a little bit more. But there's depression, which is the next stage. And the last one is acceptance. So we get to
part to it. Do not wrap it up with those two, because you already know. Part to it. Facts.
part 2 is coming. I just wanted to talk just about symptoms of grief, y'all, because physical symptoms, it's really important because it takes a toll on our body. And we're not, a lot of times I hear this from entrepreneurs, I'm sick, I'm not feeling well, and we're in winter time. So don't get me wrong. Like, we know COVID made new types of illnesses, and we know, but I'm big on eating for health, right? So I know my body very well. And then one thing I've recognized about my body is that if you are not paying attention to your grief, no matter how good you eat, no matter how much you exercise, all that good stuff, you literally can become very stressed out if you're not grieving through your loss. Okay. And physical symptoms that can come from it, because grief can affect your nervous system, right? It can actually weaken your immune system. So when we talk about being sick a lot of times we're not being sick from, outdoor elements. We're being sick from grief. And some of the grief symptoms that they talked about was being tired all the time. So that's one symptom of grief. Having lots of headaches is another symptom of grief. Nausea, of course, upset stomach, joint pains, weak muscles, all these things. And sometimes, like, sleeping too much or too little, because we talked about depression. Now, these are not things that, can guarantee that you're going through grief, but they definitely come from it. And so a lot of times when I hear entrepreneurs, especially when we're going through like the holiday season, this is how we started this conversation. It's like Black Friday is coming up, Christmas is coming up. We want to make sure that you're healthy enough to be able to serve other people throughout the holiday with your business. So just acknowledging where you are. I want you to drop a comment if this resonated with you, number one. And I want you to tell us what you learned, right? If you feel like you're in a cycle or in a stage, I would love to hear that from you. If you have experienced grief symptoms before and what your story is like, you never know who it's going to touch, who is going to really, we have people, man, they've heard stories and it's changed their life. So we want to just make sure that you definitely understand that. And there's emotional symptoms as well, but we'll talk about that next week. All right. So y'all have an amazing day. Thank you for tuning in. And we'll be back next week for Entrepreneurial Cycles. We'll continue with the grief stages conversation. And if you want to hear anything particular from what we offer, I know Aarionna has great programs that you can work with her as a mindset coach. She's going to walk you through getting yourself clear on exactly what you want to do in your business from a biblical standpoint. And for me, I make sure that I walk you through a step-by-step process of learning how to start, grow, and scale your business. And this is going to mean that you have to be very serious and intense about making sure that you want your business to be sustainable over the long haul. Okay. So I'm here for that. All right. We'll see you next week. Have an amazing day. Thank y'all.